So let me ask you some point blank questions. Some of them have obvious answers, but they're worth asking and getting you on record about a few things. Does racism exist in this country today?
Yeah, it definitely does.
In what forms and what does that look like? We've touched upon this, but like, what is racism and what form does it exist? And then my follow-on question is, how do you solve the problem? Or do you try and solve the problem?
A racist policy. I do believe that there are racist policies that could potentially exist. For something to be systemically racist or a racist policy, I have to see institutional collusion against a group, basically. I have to see that people have decided to collude to disadvantage the rights of a certain group. So, for example, Jim Crow was a racist policy because a group of governors and legislatures across the South colluded to deny rights and disenfranchise black people. That was real racist policy. However, if one guy decides to say a bad racist word that we don't like, it does not mean that the entire school is racist. It does not mean that the whole free speech policy that we have is a racist policy. That's not true. You have to have collusion.
Do you believe systemic racism then is a prevalent problem in this country? I think most people would agree that you will always have individuals who have some degree of racism, in some cases, unfortunately, overt racism, either because they've somehow inherited this from their upbringing, been taught to hate people. How is it that you solve the individual racism problem in society? Is it something that government should be involved in trying to solve?
I think you have to define what level of racism is truly intolerable. And what I mean is this. Does somebody saying, "Where are you from?" is that a racist gesture? Or I'll take it, maybe to level 2. If somebody says, "Hey, you Oriental," which is, kind of an outdated, obsolete phrase, is that person a racist? And you have to decide to what level of action is actually immoral and needs to be stamped out. It needs to be prosecuted. And in my opinion, you can't live in a society. America is not America without free speech. You have to allow, and free speech means sometimes people are going to say offensive things to you. So I am not going to prosecute, or I will not seek to prosecute someone for simply saying a racist thing against me, even though I would be uncomfortable if somebody said a bad word to me about that, or if a black person said something about a black person, But I would seek to prosecute racism, when somebody is denying me, for example, service at the lunch counter because I'm Asian, because that is, a violation of my rights to commerce, and that's a violation of the Civil Rights Act. So I think that is something that's prosecutable.
So you're drawing a line between people's ability to think the thoughts that they wish to think, say the ugly words that they wish to say, even if they're offensive, but you kind of have to draw a line as far as the state is concerned and state-imposed penalties where you begin to infringe upon the actual physical rights of our citizens, and they're no longer granted access to certain services or is that a fair way of stating this? That that you're in favor of people being able to think and say hateful things. I'm putting it strongly. We talk hate speech, right?
I mean, I'm not in favor of it, but I don't think
you're in favor of maintaining the rights of people to be terrible people and think and say terrible things.
Yeah, they have the right to say hateful speech. They do.
So let me wrap up with just a couple of thoughts, and I want to. This is a hard problem. I speak all around the country. I speak about what's happening in our military. predominantly. You should have easy and ready answers to this question, but I still have trouble with it because I like being honest, and it's difficult to give an honest answer that is meaningful. Perhaps in your shoes, given the work that you're doing, you've got good answers to this, and politicians always have ready answers to questions like this, and so I've not necessarily felt compelled to. But I lay out a bunch of problems for people. Okay, and that's what I'm doing in this podcast. Is okay, we got these issues. And there's good organizations and people who are trying to tackle these problems. But then the average citizen listens to this and they might be angry or feel like, it's my time to stand up and do something about this. And the question then comes, what can I do to help? There are simple answers. I don't want to steal your thunder, but simple answers like, well, hey, there are organizations set up that are actually capable of tackling some of these issues. Like, throw your support behind some of these organizations, whether they be nonprofits or otherwise. ColorUsUnited.org. Support the organization. But maybe it's unfair to ask it this way. What is the average citizen to do, in your view, to fight back in a way that doesn't further exacerbate the problems that we see in society? Because so many people are unmeasured, in my view, and so many people want to do the right things, but don't necessarily fix problems. They compound problems. And what is it that we do? I mean, what does the listener do to help solve these problems you're trying to tackle, or in many cases, can they not?
Don't think about changing the world. Just think about changing the environment around you just a little bit at a time. I think that relieves a lot of people off the pressure. One thing that wokeism does is that it's bipolar in the sense that it tells people that they're completely impotent to change the world, and then it tries to tell people to also become an activist to change the world. So don't think in those terms. Just think about your own community. Invite your immigrant neighbor to talk about politics. They will really appreciate it because they don't know anything about politics. So invite your immigrant neighbor to talk about it. That's number one. Number two is subtly influence your employer or your HR manager. And there are many ways to do that without sacrificing your job. Somebody is talking about, somebody's haranguing themselves about DEI and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and you just sit down, have coffee with them, and chat about them. Be a listening board, and make subtly known that what should we be progressing to? Oh, we should be progressing towards a harmonious workplace. Okay, then let's not go with policies that try to exacerbate racial tension, right? Oh yeah, I don't think we should. That's great. Then maybe we should not go down divisive roads that try to divide people off the basis of race, like this nonprofit is suggesting or this author is suggesting. Maybe we should go with this and that. Subtly influence your employer, subtly influence your employees, talk to your immigrant neighbor, talk to your family, talk to your school, show up at a school board meeting. There are little ways that you can do these things. It's a good thing. You're doing good things.